to this one now, and the process of moving from analogue to digital broadcasting for television and radio must be done and dusted by the end of March next year. If you don't already have a set-top box by then, well, you won't be able to watch TV. The plan was approved by Cabinet recently. Let's delve into what this actually means with Justine Limpitlaw, an electronic communications law consultant from Wits University. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm relying on you to break this down because I simply can never understand exactly how it works. First of all, why is it important that we make this digital migration?
So the reason why it's important is that digital broadcasting is much more efficient from a spectrum use than analog broadcasting. So what that means is that we can have many more programs and much more diversity, many more stations for broadcasting, and of a much higher quality in terms of picture resolution and sound. But much more importantly than the benefits for broadcasting is the so-called digital dividend, because by moving broadcasters off the analog spectrum, we free it up to be able to allocate it to and assign it to mobile telcos, so that we're able to provide cheap universal access to broadband internet. And that's obviously vital for all sorts of connectivity issues for the public. So it's vital that this happens.
Yeah, and that broadband access, it's going to help our economy grow, because there have been studies that show if you've got access to that sort of broadband, you can grow your economy because people have access online. So, okay, I understand that now, and thank you for explaining it so clearly. Why have there been so many delays? I mean, we are talking years and years and years. This should have happened ages ago.
We're not talking years, we're talking decades, many decades. In the early, or in the noughties, I should say in the mid-noughties, the then minister promised that digital migration would be done and dusted by the 2010 World Cup. Then we were promised it would be done and dusted by 2012. Then we were promised we would definitely make the International Telecommunication Union's international deadline for our region of June 2015. And now we're told it's going to be done and dusted by the end of March next year. But I just want to correct you, Sally. The actual switch off of analog television signals is scheduled to be finished by the end of January. So in fact, we've got November, December, January. We've got three months and a bit more what's left of October.
Yeah.
So it's really a very tight deadline, and I cannot see how it's going to happen. The one thing that you asked that's important is why the delays. And all I can say is that there was massive political shenanigans that went on. We've heard at the Zondo Commission, for example, how and a lot of this, I think, can be laid at successive ministers. But I have to say that former Minister Faith Mutambi really needs to carry the lion's share of the blame for the disastrous, absolutely disastrous and inept process of supposedly migrating analog to digital signals with a terrible set-top box design, with clear political and I have to say corrupt machinations by the then COO Hlaudi Motsoeneng of the SABC, who changed the SABC's position on set-top boxes and what the standards needed to be, to the detriment of all free-to-air broadcasters, including ETV, but also the SABC.
Yeah, so that's what I want to ask. You know, you say that there's political machinations going on here. What's at stake? Because Khalik Sheriff, my boss, was on this channel earlier, and he's outraged. They're going to go to court over this matter. They're saying that it's just not fair, it's just not okay. What is at stake, actually?
Well, what is at stake with the way that they are? I mean, Khalik and I think all right-minded people understand that the migration to digital has to happen. But it's unheard of, absolutely unheard of globally, to announce a hard switch-off date when no one in your country has access to digital terrestrial broadcasting. And it's important that we make the distinction between satellite broadcasting, which is obviously also digital, and terrestrial broadcasting. We're talking about switching off the terrestrial analog signals. They have to be able to be available on terrestrial free digital signals, those services, and more importantly, not just that the signals are out there, but that people actually have the equipment necessary, either digital television sets, which, as you know, are very expensive, or the necessary digital set-top boxes to allow people to receive the signal. The reason why your boss is so outraged is that only 4%, sorry, if I can just say, only 4% of ETV's terrestrial transmitters have been able to be switched off because people have access to digital decoders in particular areas. That means that 96% of your terrestrial transmitters are absolutely essential to reach your terrestrial audience. And they're talking about switching that off in 3 months.
I'm going to ask you to be very brief because I've got very little time, but what I want to know is, so you're saying actually, and no, I mean, it's a complex issue, but we were actually having a discussion, is it end of Jan, is it end of March? I think the President said end of March, but the ministers pulled it to the end of January, and as you say, that's a really difficult deadline to meet. What does it mean for the people watching at home who've got DSTV set-top boxes? Are they going to be unaffected by this?
People with any kind of satellite direct-to-home box, so DSTV, but also the much smaller but also important OpenView HD and StarSat, should be able to, or will be able to, get the current free-to-air channels. Now, the problem is that many people don't have DSTV or OpenView HD. They don't have satellite direct-to-home. So that's a practical problem. But there's a more fundamental, almost ideological problem, if I can say that, which is that you do not want to migrate terrestrial audiences only onto digital platforms because, frankly, of the dominance of DSTV, which all it does then is further benefit and entrench that dominant position. If we want a competitive, lively broadcasting environment, we have to have terrestrial access to broadcasting and not just satellite access. 36% of all South Africans only have analog access. That is going to be devastating for those people, and those people are the poor and the marginalized. That a government that supposedly is poor focused can do this is really
and we do know, of course, Justine, thank you very much. We do know that government has been rolling out some set-top boxes to very poor homes, but the timeframes are incredibly tight. And thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. Justine Limpitlaw, an electronic communications law consultant.